Hey gang, welcome to this episode of the Dealer Playbook Podcast. I'm sitting down with my pal. I've gotten to know him quite well over the last year. Lots of slang and text messages, like a couple of crazy dudes. Enjoyed our conversations, and I wanted to bring his mind and intellect to the DPB gang. I'm sitting down with my good friend Colby Joyner. He is the VP of Sales at Konect.ai. Colby, thanks so much for joining me on the Dealer Playbook Podcast.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you having me. I look forward to it.
So the question I want to dig in, because you are such a strategic thinker, that I know for certain. Every time we chat about something, you are like, let me draw up the schematic. So the first question is, have you always been that way, or is that something that you learned being, wait for it, folks, an air traffic controller in the Air Force?
Yeah, totally. Military air traffic control got that out of me. 100%.
What made you decide to join the service?
I didn't have any other better opportunities, and I was trying to, I know now you and I are slinging texts back and forth. I was trying to sling some cars, and that wasn't going very well. And I needed to do something with my life, and college wasn't my thing. And so I was like, you know what? At least if I go this place, I'm being held accountable to actually do something instead of just doing it on my own free will.
Right. How do you pick air traffic control? Like
I didn't. That's the funny thing.
You get assigned?
Well, so I actually went in guaranteed loadmaster, which is a fancy title for like a flight attendant for cargo. And so my cousin have since retired from the Navy, but I went in to a guaranteed loadmaster because I could wear the cool flight suits. I would travel the world. I was single, I was like, hey, I'm gonna go in as loadmaster and just travel the world. And I decided to delay my basic training because I wanted to go to my birthday. Like, it's my birthday month. And I was like, I want to delay. I want to enjoy one last good birthday being non-military, whatever. And so they were like, sure, yeah, that's fine. Go for it. So when I finally went to basic, they had actually had a situation where they were asking for volunteers to join TAC-P, which is Tactical Air Control Party, which is basically like you're an air traffic controller, but you drop in and you build the runway and they land, and then you destroy the runway and you move on. So some really cool, movie type stuff. So I raised my hand. I was like, sure, let's do it. I'm in. So they pulled me aside. They're like, well, you can't. You're guaranteed air traffic control. We can't pull you out of that. And I said, I'm not guaranteed air traffic control. I'm guaranteed loadmaster. And they're like, no, there's only one class this year and you skipped it. So here's your next guarantee. So that's how I landed.
I know it's
there.
That's kind of funny. It's like, how'd you end up in the military? Well, the same way I ended up in the car business. It's like, It's like the story in reverse, because everybody just like falls into the car business. You kind of like fell into the military.
Yep, pretty much.
You were the dude, even though this is a different branch of the armed forces. You were the dude in Top Gun. That's like negative Ghost Rider. The pattern is full. Like, that was you.
Yes. In
did
some
people
sense,
ever buzz the tower? Is that a thing?
I wasn't a tower controller, but in some sense, yes, it was still an air traffic controller, but I was a radar controller. Right. So I sat in front of looks like a big, round green and black video screen.
Like an old video game.
Two different types. Yep. Which is crazy because I never have, and still to this day, don't play video games. So it was never like my forte in general.
What's the big thing, like, as you look back on that experience and translate it now to the experience that you've had in the automotive industry? What are some of the things that are just so clear in your mind? You're like, I got that from the military. Like, this has helped me in so many ways now in the car business.
Strategic thinking and organization. Those are the two big things that are like, I was not an organized person before, I am now. And then the strategic thinking of saying, okay, here's option A, B, and C. Here's path A, B, and C. Here's all the variations that could come from that. How do I navigate that? How do I prepare for what's about to come and have backup plans just in case?
You've worked in some pretty hectic environments, dare I say, in automotive where like just things are happening. There's so many things going, not very structured, not very organized. And like, as I've thought about it, I remember I was driving once and I was thinking about you and just like the situations you've encountered. And I'm like, yeah, it's because he's in air traffic control. Like it's because he went from the most stressful job so that this probably doesn't even seem that stressful to him.
I mean, it's organized chaos, which is fine. Like if it's just organized chaos, and a lot of people can handle organized chaos. A lot of people, but the majority of people can only handle the organized portion of that. If you can't throw in chaos in there and have those bumps in the road and have, hey, it's a fire. We got to put this fire out and stay calm, cool, and collected and trying to figure it out. Then you can't necessarily be in those very large, big type positions or big roles or large companies. When you're handling massive amounts of data, massive amounts of customers, massive amounts of, projects, it's organized chaos, the calm under pressure, which I can't say that I'm always calm under pressure, but at least in my mind, I'm still always thinking about how to resolve the issue or solve the problem or figure a way out.
Yeah, we're not just here to vent about it. There's going to be a solution on the tail end of this deal. You said something earlier that I want to kind of just tie even closer to, like, I'm sure those listening, those that have listened to the DPB for a long time know that I am a big, like, listen with an open mind and then think about ways actively that you can implement this conversation into your day to day. But there's a very simple and close tie-in parallel that I want to draw as I've listened to you share your experience about the military. You said that you were not a very organized or structured person, and you then somehow became a very organized and structured person through your experience there, which tells me that this is something that is completely teachable. And we are plagued in the automotive industry with the 3 Ps, right? People, process, and what is it? People, well, whatever it is. I can't remember off the top of my head. I should probably get more structured. Product. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I can't believe I just skipped out on product.
It phased me too. So don't beat yourself up too much.
But it tells me that this is something teachable. And there's kind of 2 sides to the narrative in automotive, especially given everything that's happening at time of recording this. We are in a recession, but nobody in power wants to admit it. We know that the minute that they admit it, everyone's going to panic. And we're going to fall back on the fundamentals that for some reason we have a hard time grasping. The one in particular is process. And the 2 narratives are you either get down with the process or you're doomed. So the question to you is, are we doomed?
Yes and no. Yes, I think we are if we maintain our current state of affairs. If there's a lot of preaching about process, but not a lot of execution on any forward movement of how to implement any of that process. And the process in a dealership across the country, regardless of what store you're in, unless you're in a group that's large enough and there's a unified process across it, the process varies so much between store to store that if we maintain our current trajectory, yeah, I would totally say that we are. But the good news is just like me going into the military, if I would have maintained my current trajectory without that sharp movement, quoting friends like pivot, pivot, we got to pivot, right? And if I wouldn't have pivoted, then I would be nowhere where I'm at today. So it's like, we have to pivot. We got to move. We got to change the direction, and not in a, vendor way, not in a who are we using for this or for that. It's the fundamentals. It's all teachable. It's all able to be learned. I think it comes down to proving that it is valid. That's one of the reasons why I think obviously military is very easy to be able to jump in there. You go into basic training, they beat you down, they build you back up. But in the end, it's because they want to be able to prove that what they're telling you works. And you have no question or no ability to dissuade yourself or to, leave. And if we do the same sort of thing in automotive and say, look, we're here to prove it to you, but you got to just go all in. You have no choice. This is the direction. As long as it's valid proof and we can show that it works, then I think that the industry as a whole is not doomed. I think we have, glory days ahead, but right. We have to come together in this kind of unified way of saying, okay, we got to pivot a little bit.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I mean, especially when you look at somebody such as Damon Lester, who's the outgoing, chair of the NAMAD, National. I always get screwed up on the National Automobile Minority Dealer
Association of Dealers,
National Association of Minority Auto Dealers. There it is.
Something like that. Yeah.
And he had been in that role for years, not as a dealer, as an accountant, a money guy, a finance guy who within the last year or 18 months says, this is the right time to go and buy into a dealership. So to, share your sentiment about, I think there are glory days ahead. I think there's a massive opportunity in this industry, but you're also right in that how long can we keep going, skirting the fundamentals under the rug? Like sooner or later. So that the question then for me becomes, okay, so say we're an organization, we've been profitable. Maybe we haven't felt the need per se to really dial in our processes. But now I want to turn over a new leaf and I say, you know what, this is right. That I got to focus on process. I need to focus on my people. How do you turn over that new leaf in a way that gets buy-in when maybe perhaps you don't personally, say as the leader or manager, have much proof behind you?
You bring everybody in. It's a forum. You get buy-in from participation. So, if you're a dealership or a dealer group and you're like, hey, okay, our next focus, we've been profitable, everything's running good, but we need to tighten it up a little bit. We need to be more unified. We need to be, our process needs to be on point. Bring your managers in, bring your GSM, GMs, your fixed ops directors, your service directors, your parts directors, your, marketing and advertising director, bring everybody in and have a forum, right. An open forum of clear communication, collaboration, making sure that all points are handled, whether it takes a day or it's a week or whatever it is, get the communication and collaboration from the team. That way everybody buys in, everybody feels like their voice is heard. And then you come up and you organize and you structure out what is our process. And then from that point, you manage the process, not the people.
And there's going to be multiple different processes, right? Like we're talking about processes if might just be one, but no, there's multiple processes. There's going to be a CRM process, a, BDC process, follow-up process. Like there's so many sorts of things. So how do you, where would you recommend starting? It's like, okay, well, I've got this molehill in front of me. Where do I actually start climbing this thing? What's the first process I should focus on?
I would kind of put it up between two things. I know you said first, but I would put it up between two things. The first process is the clear and concise understanding of role responsibility. What is that process? Like, who are you in that role? Are you a GSM? What are your responsibilities? Clear and concise, written down. This is what you have. That way you're not being held accountable for somebody else's mistake or issue. And you know exactly who you hold accountable beneath you and who is holding you accountable above you. So clear and concise process of this is who you are. This is your role in our store. This is how you can impact in a positive way, not to reduce the workload or reduce the responsibility, but to have a very focused mindset of this is what I know I can do. And this is what I'm held accountable for, instead of getting distracted to manage and handle other things. Number one. Equally, number two, from an outward perspective, it's the sales process. Just there's so many caveats on that. You can dive down into, being granular and saying, well, is that the internet process, the BDC process? No, I'm talking about when a customer comes to your store. What happens the second they cross the berm? The second they cross the curb? What happens from that point moving forward? Did you
say the berm?
Yes.
Is that an American word? Like, is that?
I honestly, I didn't learn that word until I lived in North Dakota. And so I'm thinking it's a, a Manitoban word that happened to go south a little bit.
It's gotta be not to like steer us off track, but you said berm. I'm like, okay, I'm learning a lot, but now I'm learning a whole lot extra. I'm like, you say a word I've never heard before. What the heck is a berm? The doorstep?
It's like a curb. It's like the curb or the middle place between the road and the sidewalk, or between two roads. Kind of like between two ferns, but between two roads.
I've got to find a way to incorporate the word berm into all future podcasts. Oh, that's awesome. No, this makes perfect sense. When I look at even building my team, the biggest roadblocks that we have encountered have been around people not having clarity about their role and responsibilities. Like, what am I supposed to be doing? And the problem with that is, if they're unclear about their role and what's entailed or expected of them, then they also start taking on other things and feeling incredibly unsatisfied, because now all of a sudden they're not getting paid enough to do all of this.
Or unstable in their position. They don't feel like they're stable.
Right. The ripple effect. And I know for certain, you and I both know for certain, there's somebody listening to this right now who's going to like somehow guerrilla marketing style place this episode on their leader's desk to hear this portion, because that is the sad element of process, is when people don't know what's expected of them because it hasn't been spelled out or articulated. That's not to suggest that they're incapable. It just means that something was defined. That's what they said yes to. They get into it, realize that there's no possible way to just do all of those things. They got to do all of this extra stuff. Now they're not getting paid enough. They feel like they've reached their limit. They start looking and moving on to somewhere else, greener pastures, whatever you want to call it. When if you simply adjusted and sat down together, to your point, participation creates buy-in. If they simply just sat down together and said, hey, let's talk about your role in particular and get some clarity around it. And we don't have to make every decision right now, but we're at least committed to this conversation to make sure that we have consensus. How do you feel about that? Boom. Like, morale is instantly restored, I found. And, it gives you guys some time, takes the pressure off to like figure out everything in the moment.
Well, I think it creates more reliability on each individual role, and you're going to have far more experts than jack of all trades. And, if you have a team full of experts versus a team full of jack of all trades, the jack of all trades are going to sit around and all tell you 13 different ways to put a doorknob on. Right. But the expert in the room they're going to look to that one person and say, how do you put a doorknob on? And they're going to say like this, and they do it. So it creates far less animosity between the managing members and the executives in the team. And, overall, you can start to have some reliability and confidence in the decisions that are being made, because that person is now further studied in that role, versus trying to, over everything, manage 13 different areas. They're not having to be the best BDC internet director in the world, along with the best sales manager, desk manager, putting pencils out there and knowing all the financing and the lenders that they use and understanding the sales process and this and that and that. It's like, no, you're a desk manager. So your role is very clear. This is what we expect of you. And now they can be the best desk manager out there.
Yeah. And then there becomes clarity in what the next steps you should take as an organization are, because you've now empowered that individual to look at their area of responsibility through a different lens. Mm-hmm. And now they're going to be filled with insights that they can then bring back to you and say, hey, I think we ought to tweak this, or I think that needs to change. And that then creates those next steps that you take.
Absolutely.
So we're not doomed if we start with role responsibilities, everybody getting clarity on that. We know, or I can at least see the path on how that creates future initiative or initiatives rather as an organization, things to focus on. And then it also brings up this other thing that I'd love your thoughts on, which is if we look at the current climate of dealerships who don't have these processes in place and don't know what their next initiatives are, it's like it makes us not just dealers. First of all, I hope everybody, I'm always worried that people are going to take things wrong and think we're just dogging on dealers. No, it's everybody. I'm just as susceptible to what I'm talking about as anybody. But it's like, then what happens is it makes me more susceptible to believe the pitch of every product supplier or service provider out there, because I don't have the clarity on what I'm supposed to be doing, but I like the idea of what they're saying or how it sounds. What's your take on that?
I 1000% agree. I look, if you understand, it's like understanding and being knowledgeable enough to be dangerous, but that doesn't mean that the danger is a good type of danger, right?
Right.
You can make a decision to go with something or utilize something or a process or whatever it is based off of your quote unquote expert knowledge, which may not be there quite yet, but you understand it enough to say, yes, I want to do this and it'll work. And it gets you further away from that very clear process, because now you're throwing a wrench into the chain, or a wrench into the wheel or whatever. You're making another process. You're interrupting or disrupting something else. It's easy to see, or when you're on conversations, now I'm on this side of the fence. Prior I was on the other side, and I was always very friendly and always very interested in communication. Communicating with any vendor partner that was calling me up or trying to sell me on anything. But I feel like I had enough knowledge to say, hey, okay, well that sounds good, but what about this? And what about this? And having that kind of creative, abstract thinking in these items. When you get on a call with somebody and they're like, oh yeah, that works, that's awesome, and there's not a lot of questions being asked, you can understand that they're probably very good at their job, but I'm talking to them about something that they may not exactly know about, and it sounds good to them. But that's where it becomes the responsibility, and people may not like this, but it becomes a responsibility kind of the vendor to do right by the dealer, to be very clear and say, hey, you do understand that this is how this works. That means we would expect you to do this, and in return, we will do this. And sometimes that doesn't end up being the best conversation, where it ends up being where the vendor is now a partner with them. It could end up with them saying, no, well, then that doesn't make sense. But in the long run, from a business perspective, that's better for both sides.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. I mean, that's when we're out there selling, having conversations, it's a slower burn, because we want to make sure that our potential client partner knows what it's going to look like. We want zero surprises. We don't want them to be like, oh man, sold a bill of goods. We're like I kind of want to be like do we say anti or anti? Anti sounds better. Anti-vendor.
Yeah, it's not anti-pasta.
No.
Anti-vendor.
Anti-vendor. Yeah. So
the antithesis of.
Yes, but it makes perfect sense. But then also having this knowledge internally as an organization to say, okay, yeah, this looks interesting, but I need to map it back to the context of my circumstances. And I got to be honest with myself. So, hey, thanks for the demo, vendor. Here's our process now that we're going to actually judge this based off of. I'm going to get with my team. We're going to ensure that we have the bandwidth to give this the due diligence that's required at this time. Maybe we're not. Maybe it is the right time. Maybe it's not the right time. But I think collectively as an industry, we all need to come together and have that conversation of like, we get it. Everybody needs to make money to thrive and, not just survive, but thrive. But we got to be honest too. Maybe it's actually okay to slow things down just a smidge so people can get their heads straight. And maybe then we will just kill this rift between vendor and dealer once and for all, because it'll be more like partnership. Maybe that's the case. Maybe people listening are like, screw you, Cirillo, you're an idiot.
I think that there's a ton. I think there's a ton of great automotive vendor partners. Like,
right.
Vendors going towards the dealership world. I think there's a lot of great ones out there that are very clear and concise, and they communicate well and they set expectations. I would say there's probably a majority of them that are like that. There's a minority that are, looking for more of the flash in the pan versus the long burning, 24-hour
and they ruin it for everybody, like everything.
Yeah, just like everything. So I think a lot of people are, have the integrity to say, hey, hold on. But it goes into the expertise, and it goes into the, I think the people that have the biggest level of integrity when it comes to vendors speaking with dealers are the people that have been in the industry long enough that they've possibly done that in the past and got burned, or they know, hey, look, this is just the best SOP, the best procedure, the best process for us to make sure that our clients they stay with us, that we serve them well, and our business continues to grow. But it goes into the hiring, and I know we're bouncing around everywhere, but it goes into the hiring and recruiting of people into the industry, whether it's retail or non-retail, on the vendor side, making sure that the role clarity is there, that there's experience there, starting them out at proper levels, understanding the industry as a whole. On my side at the company that I'm at right now, it's that, hiring somebody that has, knowledge of the automotive industry, knowledge of, potentially SaaS work or vendor work, but there's so much education that goes into that, because you have people calling on general managers, GSMs, marketing directors that have a wealth of knowledge. They speak a certain language. They can smell the rotten egg coming, right, if it's not right. So there's a lot of education that goes into it. And that's where, making sure that you're doing due diligence in the company level to present the best product without, giving a bad demo or a bad representation.
How do you justify the actual time it takes to deploy properly versus, contrasting that against this insatiable appetite each of us have for the immediate? Because develop a process. Obviously sounds easier said than done. It's going to take time. It's going to take time to even, phase line that out. Like, what are the phase lines of developing out this process? Okay, well, by this date, we want to have talked to everybody. By this date, we want to have had one-on-ones with everybody. By this date, that takes time. How do you justify the amount of time it takes?
It's setting the expectation from the beginning of the discussion of what is our process. It's saying from the very get-go, this is not something that we're going to walk out of this office here in 4 hours and have it and execute on it and just go. This is something that, right now it's the latter part of November. If I'm going to sit down with somebody and say, hey, we're going to discuss and get this new process put together, it may not be till the beginning of Q2 that it's all buttoned up. Like, we're going to take time on this, because this is not something that's again, it's not a flash in the pan. This is something that is going to be a part of our core moving forward. So we got to dot all of our I's. We got to cross all of our T's. We got to make sure, and we got to, test it, A/B test it, take one store and do it one way, another store and do it another way temporarily. Figure out the kinks in this process, so that when we launch it and it's full scale, everything, that it's clean, it's tight, it's working well.
And realistically, if we look at the dealerships across, at least the places that listen to this podcast, I would say majority of them are going to experience a bit of a slowdown. They typically do around this time of year. Everybody heads into the Christmas season. They're loading up their shopping carts with all the unnecessary things that are going to break, 20 days later. But things typically slow down. Maybe some management start to take some holidays or extended times off during this time period. This is kind of the perfect, that slowdown. This is the perfect time to sit down and plug away at some of this stuff, so that you're coming out of the gates, like you said, by the end of the upcoming quarter, with things ready to be buttoned up.
Yeah. You have to be able to take the downturns and inspect and redirect. So inspect what happened previously and then redirect as needed. So how do we have this downturn right here? Like, hey, our leads are down, or our conversions are down, or our engagement's down, or, overall service ROs are down or whatever it is, inspect it, try to figure out why that's happening, create a process around it, try to fix it, and redirect moving forward. I think the biggest issues is automotive is a 30-day business. It's 30 days. And so you don't even have, even if you launch a product or launch a process, typically it never starts working 100% of the time on day one of that 30-day. So then you're judged by upper level or even people on your level. If you've instituted this process, you're judged at the end of the first month of its success, when you probably didn't even have full buy-in until maybe the 15th or the 20th of the month of how this actually works. So it becomes a habit. So then you already have some negative thought processes on the process. And moving into month 2, it's like you may have 75% of the people doing it, but then you're not getting the growth that you want. So then it just, in the end, it doesn't work because the mindset of automotive is the 30-day. I think when it comes to sales, sure, 30 days. I understand the 30-day is for payroll, for inventory, for the OEMs are coming in here saying, hey, here's your allocation this month and this and that. That makes sense. I get it. But when it comes to a process and everything, you have to be looking on a quarter by quarter. You got to be looking at every 6 months, every year. How is this stuff adapting and changing? Are we seeing, a potential downturn real quick, but overall, as time goes on, are we going to see the positive results from this? And so you have to sit and be calm and be patient and inspect and review and not freak out, not be the person that just says, hey, okay, it's not working, we're changing. You got to just have patience. It's going to get there. And if it doesn't get there in a very specific allocated amount of time, then go back to the drawing board. It's okay.
It's an iterative approach. It always has been. But so often we don't think that it is, and that leads us to believe that things should happen faster. But it is an iterative approach. It doesn't happen overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day. You ever said that to yourself before? Mm-hmm. Well, maybe now it's time to start accepting that that's actually the case. Man, look how quickly 30 minutes flies by when we're into the conversation. I want to turn it back over to you one last time. How can those listening or watching get in touch with you?
Best way is either Facebook or LinkedIn. Those are the easiest ways. I answer the Messenger and LinkedIn and Facebook Messenger. If you have questions or anything of that nature, reach out to me there. That's literally the easiest way of social media.
Colby Joyner, thanks so much for joining me on the Dealer Playbook podcast.
Thank you.